and Meghan, the documentary from Netflix, 6 parts, 6 glorious hours, doesn't dominate the Emmys next year, I'll be very upset. Because the final 3 episodes of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's TV doco dropped last night and it had more drama than the White Lotus finale. We're going to talk about it in depth, just as we did last week, on an episode just for subscribers this afternoon, because we know that not all Outlouders share our obsession with this particular story. But for those who were watching along or didn't want to watch but wondered what they missed, the main takeaways from the last 3 hours were that the royal family is every bit as toxic as we thought. Last night's episodes took in the wedding and the honeymoon period afterwards, and then tracked how everything went wrong. The couple's fury at not being defended by the royal machine in the face of bad press and relentless trolling, their decision to leave and how that played out, Harry's assertions that Charles and William's offices were leaking against he and Meghan constantly, and that the infamous Sandringham summit, where what became known as Megxit was hammered out, was a stressful brawl where William shouted at Harry, Charles lied, and the Queen just sat there. Mia, did last night's show change your mind about anything at all?
Yeah, it did. It really did. And I didn't expect it to. It's made me reflect on some of the very strident beliefs I've held, and how, in fact, I have probably been played by the institution, by the media that's working with the institution. And I also think that a few different things can be true at once. I can believe that Harry and Meghan can be really annoying and lack self-awareness and be ridiculous for keeping on their Duchess title. But I can, Duke and Duchess of Sussex title. But I can also see the way that public opinion is manipulated, not just by the media, but also by his family. And that the big revelation for me, and it's not just him spelling it out, like we all kind of suspected it, is the way that each of the palaces, meaning Charles, William, Harry, have their own press people, and, previously the Queen as well. And those press people compete against one another. And we knew that from Diana's experience and what she said, and how people get upset about their work not being covered by the press, because there's only so much attention to go around. And what I just kept saying to myself, and what I wrote in my notes, is how can the royal family have let this happen again after Diana? How could they not have learned from that?
It's interesting what you say about annoying, because that is something that from the first episode I heard a lot of commentary, whether it was the M and the H or the my love, my darling thing. Being annoying is, firstly, there's an element of it that's
I'm annoying. Like lots of people, it's not a crime to be annoying.
And it is also, I think it's gendered, and it's not the point. And I think I look at, and I mean, I'm guilty of this. There were elements of listening to archetypes that I was quite dismissive of. But what I found brilliant about how this was done, and Meghan and Harry did a great job, but I think it's the director and the creator that deserves to win all the awards, because this was one of the best made documentaries I think I've seen in a very long time. But the way the narrative was told, that we were drip fed, and we remembered this, we ran stories on it, which was about the comparison between Kate and Meghan, and how when Kate had an avocado, it was lovely, and when Meghan had an avocado, it was fueling drought and famine. Like, that annoyance with someone is so purposely manufactured by tabloids. There have been people come out just in the last 24, 48 hours from tabloids that work around the palace saying, we were told at the time to leave Will and Kate alone, and that Harry and Meghan were up for grabs at any time. We could write whatever we wanted about them. And of course this makes sense, because this is not a normal family. So everyone who goes, you sold your brother out, how could you go on a public platform and air your dirty laundry? This is a family whose highest value isn't family. It's the it is the perpetuation and the stabilization of the institution to
of
which,
a ridiculous institution.
Yes, they belong.
my feelings about this are much more complicated because I 100%, and I have been for a long time, but that just entirely solidified for me last night. The Meghan criticism is disgusting. It's disgusting. It's racist. It's sexist. It also goes against just all our basic fundamental human beliefs about how people should be treated and talked about and how trolling is dehumanizing and all that stuff. But the smoking gun that's missing to me in this whole conspiracy thing is what on earth is the royal family's motivation for letting this happen? Because as you said, Mia, how could they let this happen again? This whole thing has made them look awful. It has been the worst thing to happen to the royal family in our generation, actually. And we all saw last night, and anyone involved in this world will tell you, that when Meghan married into that family, they were fucking delighted.
Yes.
Because this was the new lease of life that they needed, and they knew it. And they embraced her, and they were so this is the future. And I don't really buy this just very straightforward discussion about jealousy. Oh, they just got jealous that we were better at the job.
I don't think it's about jealousy.
It's just about jealousy.
At all.
Because you have to cast your mind back, and I've been doing a little bit of Googling this morning to remind myself of what was happening around the time that the tide turned on Meghan. And I think you're right. It's hard to unscramble the egg between racism, between what we do to women after we raise them up. And she was raised up as the second coming, and this happens to every woman, whether it's Jennifer Lawrence,
Taylor Swift,
Nicole Kidman, Billie Eilish, any woman. We lift them up,
love them,
and then we take them down. And so there was that conflated with racism, which absolutely was there, and it's something that runs very deep in Britain, but all over the world, of course. And also, at the same time, though, you have to look at what was going on in the royal family that they wanted to distract from. Oh, wait, the Queen's son is friends with a pedophile and is also being accused of sexual assault of a minor. Essentially, she was a sexual trafficking of a minor. We don't really want that talked about much because that's awkward, particularly since it's the Queen's favourite son. Also around that time, William, remember his very close friendship with that woman who was called Rose someone? That didn't last long. We don't really want people talking about that. So you know what? Meghan made Kate cry about the bridesmaid and the pushy princess and the Duchess difficult and all of that. And I just think that it's all of those. I don't think it's just one of those things. I think it's all of those things.
I reckon, Holly, I know what you're saying. I don't think that this was a long game for the royal family. I think it was a short game that they played without looking at the long-term consequences.
Yes.
So I think that on a Monday, it was a decision. On a Tuesday, it was a decision. And then you had houses leaking against each other. And I don't want from this Will and Kate to become the villains, because I actually don't think they are villains. I think Will is a man who is also trying to protect his family.
Agree.
And so what he was doing the only thing he'd ever learnt to do, what he knew to protect the institution that he would be the king of one day. And so they were kind of leaking, but not seeing what the long-term consequences of this would be. And I don't think that they necessarily expected that Harry and Meghan would blow this whole thing up, or if they did, they certainly didn't expect them to speak about it.
Exactly.
And so I
that
think
was the wild card.
Backfired.
Yeah, I get all that, and I do, but and I really I thought that I came out of watching this whole thing with an enormous amount of admiration for them and just how outrageously courageous they are. Like, they really are, because basically what happened is they're presented with the status quo, and it was the status quo, because you can dig up a million awful headlines about Kate. You can dig up a million awful headlines about Camilla. I'm not saying that this isn't different because of race, but that stuff is all true that Harry's family was saying to them. Everybody goes through this, you've got to ride it out. Just like everybody also goes through intense periods of popularity. When Kate and William came to Australia, remember, with baby George, they were every bit as popular as Harry and Meg's when they came. Like, this is all swings and roundabouts. So I think I get that's all true, but I also want us to remember that this brilliant documentary was telling us one side of the story.
Yeah.
Like, they were telling us a truth, but it was one truth, because there were things left out of this too. Of course there were, and there would be if I'm telling it. Like, when they went through their Megxit period, they left out all that stuff about how they'd actually set up, you know, Sussex Royal with a logo and a website, and it was all ready to go. And they made it seem so unreasonable that the royals were not into their idea of moving to Canada or South Africa or wherever. But think about it, that is an entirely unworkable solution. Like, to have an outpost of the royal family living in another part of the Commonwealth, kind of operating as a brand within a brand, that's never gonna work, right? So I think that when Harry's going, it was so unfair that they wouldn't let us do that. I was thinking, well, I wouldn't let you do that if I was the Queen.
I agree with
But
that.
That wouldn't
I
make
agree
any
with you.
sense at all.
I agree with what you're saying, that this was one side of the story, and I think we've come to expect that from certain documentaries. Why I think it's important and valid is because we only heard the other side for
Well, we
so
didn't
many
hear the
years.
other side.
Well,
we just made up our own lies about it.
No, that's not true. Because I think, and I thought this after the Oprah interview, and I remember Meghan, you know, really being eaten alive for it, what she said about Kate. And the actually it was Kate that made me cry. And everyone went, why'd you go Kate? Well, she went Kate because there was a decision, this is how I see it, within the within the house of Kate and Will to leak against her and say Meghan made Kate cry. So when I say, even though they look silent and they look stoic and they look as though they're not saying anything, I think we have heard the palace's side for a really, really long time. It's just that when Meghan and Harry come out, their mouths are moving in a way that the others aren't.
Ooh,
Yeah, but I also think there's a selective.
like that.
I mean, do you really think that House Sussex weren't also going hard and leaking hard?
I think
during
they
this
were,
period?
but it was a
Do
game
we
they
also
were gonna
think?
lose.
I love it. I love it when Harry says we never wanted to do what my father's office did. His mother's office did it too. Like, there's just a lot of selective
Yes, but the person...
omission, and I get it, and I'm not being critical of them because I think they're great, but I just want to, I genuinely think they've won as well. Like, look at their life, their beautiful life. They got what they wanted. They got the more human life that Harry wanted, and they look so happy, and their family's so beautiful, and they're going to do so much good in the world. I'm so happy for them. Whereas you look at the royals traipsing out to carols last night at Westminster, and you're like, oh my God,
Yes.
that looks so
I just
awful.
feel so sorry. I feel sorry for Kate. I feel sorry for Will. I feel sorry for Charles. But I think that the reason why Diana had to come out like she did, and then Meghan and Harry, I think this is so cyclical, is because you're never going to beat the king at the game that the king or the queen at the game that they're in charge of. So you have to come out. And my biggest takeaway from it was that the mantra of the palace has always been never complain, never explain. That does not fly anymore. It doesn't fly in a 24-hour news cycle where the viciousness and the snowballing of commentary gets so out of control. The palace has learned this slowly, I think, but Harry and Meghan knew that it's not how they want to live. It's like they were handed a set of rules and they went, we don't accept these. And I think how you respond to Harry and Meghan says a lot about whether you think things should be done the way they've always been done just because.
I've got a lot more to say about this. I think we could talk about this for 100 hours.
Which we will.
But
Yes.
Let's spare everybody who's not interested in hearing our detailed thoughts, our highs and lows from the last 3 episodes, what I was texting you both throughout the show. There's a link in the show notes if you want to listen to this subscriber episode. It's dropping today, so you can go straight through and listen to it now.